One second. I will tell you when to start so we can start. I will also
Sure.
do a simple recording so we have a backup also. They put it. Okay, we are good to go. We are live. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
We have all assembled today to know more about the mental health issues that we are facing during pandemic. It's not just because of COVID alone. I mean, that's one of the main factors, but there are other factors as well. The space in which we live has changed. Space in which we work has changed. Okay, it's not just the physical part of it. It's the load, the pressure. So I can understand in one point of view. I've been working from home or away from work for almost 10 years now. So you can get away doing nothing in front of your boss, but staying away, even if you are full-time, okay, the boss is not going to be convinced that you have done enough. So that by itself adds a lot of pressure. And the funny thing about the health issues is normally we are defiant. We don't want to accept that we have some issue. Okay, we always find excuse, whether it is a frustration or whatever we went out, we always find some excuse saying that we don't have anything. But interestingly and coincidentally, in today's newspaper, there was an article which said about 20 to 25% of the people have health issues because of this pandemic. So today we are going to discuss about this, and we are lucky to have young and dynamic and upcoming clinical psychologist, Ms. Sandhya Shivakumar. Welcome, ma'am. And I invite Neeraja Gopalakrishnan, who is also in the same field. She has done her bachelor's in psychology, and she's going to pursue her master's degree very soon. So I would request Neeraja Gopalakrishnan to take over and introduce Sandhya Shivakumar. Thank you. Over to you, Neeraja.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So today I have the honor of introducing our speaker, Ms. Sandhya Shivakumar. She is a licensed clinical psychologist practicing in Chennai. She's completed her MPhil in clinical psychology from Sri Ramachandra Institute. She has had 9 years of education in the field of psychology from various institutions like Women's Christian College Chennai to King's College London, where she pursued her master's. She is currently working on her PhD. Her career as a mental health professional started during her second master's degree while closely working alongside Dr. Kirti Pai at Element Head Psychological Support Services. Ms. Sandhya has undergone intensive training working with the clinical population during her MPhil. She caters to the mental health needs of all age groups, and as a licensed clinical psychologist, she is currently working with clients having various mental health conditions like depression, OCD, and anxiety disorders. In November 2020, she started Turiya Psychological Services with the intention of touching as many lives as possible, not just those with clinical conditions. She has been doing a great job in imparting knowledge about the ways to improve an individual's overall well-being, and she is here today with us to do the same. We are so glad that you're here with us, ma'am, and without further ado, I pass it on to you to enlighten us on the topic mental health during the pandemic.
Thank you so much for that really nice introduction. So I really look forward to today's discussion, and I'm encouraging all of you to come forward with any questions you have. Please feel free to stop me in the middle. So I'm going to be a little technical about a few things, but more so touching upon a broad overview, and then very open to taking questions at a more specific level at the end of my presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I hope you can all see this. Yes. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. So I'm going to be talking to you about a broad overview on mental health and related issues that we are all facing during the pandemic. So the first wave was something in itself. We all dealt with it initially, and with a lot of panic, anxiety, unpredictability, all that was there. But somehow, towards the end, say November, December, we thought things were getting better, and then came the second wave. So not sure if we can say that we all expected it for sure, but it's hitting us in its own way and taking toll on us in a different sense. But I guess what we can confidently say is that partially, yes, we're familiar with the do's and don'ts, what's okay, what's not okay, how do we prevent, and how do we be cautious and so on. So that's a little bit of a solace. But considering the nature of the virus and everything, things have been much harder on people because of the kind of impact this wave is having. So now the WHO has recently, documented that for people who have pre-existing mental health difficulties, there's almost a 93% disruption in the services that they've been getting because of the recent onset of COVID, the second wave. And then there are a lot of studies, of which one is a systematic review, which has talked about 20% to 50% increase in the general prevalence of mental health disorders itself. So we're talking about both common and severe mental health disorders, depression, anxiety, OCD, mood disorders, psychotic disorders, all of it. And when it comes to the effects of it, yes, COVID can be considered as a period of stress for all of us in the short term. Because there's something called eustress and distress. So right now, when it's short bouts of stress, there's an adrenaline rush. We're always in this fight of flight mode, and we get on more action oriented and see how to deal with it at that point in time. But what might be risky is staying in this environment for a much longer time than we are anticipating, and what effects it can have in us neurobiologically when it comes to the long term impact of COVID, right? So it's affecting us, yes, short term, but there is a risk of us being impacted in the long term as well when it comes to mental health difficulties relating to COVID. So when you look at the short-term impact, we're looking at, for example, among children, we're looking at physical development being an issue because they don't get much time to go out and or much opportunity. So the stimulation is lacking. And socialization skills are lacking, so they don't get to interact much with other children. And then if suppose a parent is infected, they have to go to quarantine, and sometimes parents are so busy in their own world, working at home, running the chores at home, everything. So the child does not get the attention that he or she may want at that point in time. So we're talking about attachment related issues and things like that, and just the mere difficulty understanding what is going on, why is everybody staying indoors, what's happening. So that's something to do with children. When we look at the elderly on the other spectrum, we have them getting like it's difficult for them to access any hospital services because people who are in say any cancer related issues, or for dementia or any dialysis and things like that, accessing mental health related is one problem. The other one is when you go to a hospital, get your physical services, there is a difficulty, in thinking like, okay, maybe what if I contract the virus and things like that. So, and generally their stimulation is also dulled down a little bit. So on both ends it affects, and more so in the working population in the middle age, right? So there are very blurred boundaries of what's work and what's home related activities. Everything is so monotonous. You wake up and go to bed to the same day, to the same thing every day. So the long term and short term effects will vary depending on the person. Short term could be that it triggers a bout of, say, depression or anxiety, panic attacks in some people. Long term could just be the paranoia, and let's say even for OCD, there's fear of contamination and so on. So it could worsen the severity of the illness for many people. So how we can deal with this is some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. So before that, who was affected? So honestly, all of us, but to broadly categorize it, we can look at it as frontline workers, COVID positive people, the general population, that is the unaffected population, and then the families of people who are affected with COVID. But it's interesting how we're all affected, but we're all affected in different ways. So if you look at it, I've just sort of listed the continuum right from excelling to the crisis situation right now. So I think we are all somewhere in the surviving to struggling in crisis, sort of a yellow to red kind of an area right now. Some of us are just about scraping through the day. Every day is a new day, and we're trying to figure out how we feel. Is it okay to do what we're doing? And there'll be news popping up dealing with sudden change in the situation and everything. So from survival to crisis is where I would say we're all just oscillating at this point in time. So for the frontline workers, especially the current situation, I think it affects them in terms of, say, burnout related to the work they're doing. And there are a lot of moral dilemma that they have to face, right? So sometimes there is limited resources. So having to make decisions about compromising some lives versus saving other lives. It might even taunt them that they made a decision where they should have saved someone, and then an inflated sense of responsibility that comes in because you are expected to meet certain demands and so on. And of course, the COVID positive individuals always have this fear of, will I get better? Am I going to be okay? What if people lose me? How is this situation going to get better? How long am I supposed to be inside? So there's a question of getting quarantined, and then even the effects of isolation and so on. The general population, so even those who are unaffected tend to experience a sense of invisible loss. That is, because we're hearing so much about death and generally people falling sick and being affected by all of these things, there is a sense of fear, loneliness, and all of that sets in, and a monotony. And what if I get it? That what if spiral continues to affect the general population as well. And finally, the families of COVID affected individuals, there is definitely stigma. I'm sure we've all come across situations, where, in fact, like my neighbor, one of them, they came and stuck COVID positive on the wall, and then this person ripped it off, and so on. So there is stigma, like, what will others think of me, and will I get this again? If I recover, what will happen? And I think there's also a lot of news about how COVID affects you, even if you recover and come back. Like later, it might have long-term effects. So worries about that, ailing family members. So it affects all of us very differently, but ultimately it all comes down to some clinical diagnoses of depression, anxiety, PTSD, where they have sleep disturbance, and there's recurring negative thoughts of what if and nightmares and so on. Sleep disturbance is extremely prevalent, and a very high risk for people who have vulnerability to mental health disorders. Then risk of suicide. People lose the purpose of living to a larger extent, because one, you're losing your loved ones, you're watching them suffer. Two, what is the purpose really after this? Everything, how long is all this going to go on for? So very, very high chances that a sense of hopelessness and worthlessness sets in. And then the psychotic disorder, paranoia related to, I'm going to get this, it's going to be really bad, what's going to happen? So the ambiguity sort of makes the person very hyper vigilant. And of course, needless to say, OCD, already people suffering from OCD can really get this situation worsened after, because related to contamination and everything. So I'd just like to briefly use the two models to look at how theoretically we can explain what we're all going through, and how us as an individual in the middle of this entire society is actually getting affected through everything that's happening in, say, the rest of the world, right? So we do not live in, in isolation. We are interdependent individuals. We are connected with the community as a whole. So any legal policies, any change in law, funding, everything. So the everything affects us as an individual, even though we may not be directly related to those decisions. So this is one of Bronfenbrenner's socio-ecological model, right? So we exist as an individual, and then there's a microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem. So as an individual today, if you apply the COVID situation to this model, you can clearly see our neighborhoods are mostly shut. Parks are not open, beach is not open, restaurants are not open, hardly for dining and things. And then schools are functioning out of home. Our home environment is basically like a culmination of your work, your school, your leisure, everything put together, followed by the next level where your work environment and you stepping out basically to the neighborhood and so on. And then the ecosystem where we have social media, we have community related activities like temples and all that, and then physically going to school and everything. And finally the macro system where we have the legal policies and what kind of culture, value, belief, everything.
Teams can accomplish
So
until you try Monday.com.
sorry,
Monday.com,
I
super
can
flexible
hear
to manage
some video.
everything you do at work. Our teams have a really particular workflow. So we were skeptical that it brought
Is it just me, or is somebody else also able to hear?
Yeah, it's muted now.
Yeah, sorry. Right. So this is how, as an individual, as a part of the larger society, we are bound to get affected by everything that's happening around us. And on the other hand, I've also used Maslow's hierarchy of needs to understand that basically the bottom three needs are something that all of us need in order to even progress towards psychological growth, right? So physiological needs, food, water, warmth, rest, everything, safety needs, that is to not infect the virus and to get it, to be safe, to not ail from anything physically. So that is our safety needs. And then belonging and love, that is clearly physical distancing does not help. How long has it been since we got a hug? How long has it been since we physically got in contact with our friends or intimate family members? So I would say, like, whatever we require in order to function as fully creative and exercising our full potential as individuals itself is a little dicey right now, because of the fact that our basic needs itself is difficult to meet right now. So a lot of them, of course, the socioeconomically lower class or people who are struggling out there on the roads and everything are not able to meet their physiological needs, right? And also, if you are in a high risk environment working, such as a frontline worker, or if you are in the healthcare related work, you are day and again exposing yourself to a lot of situations that will increase your risk of contracting the virus. So your security, your safety, everything is sort of at stake, right? So the bottom needs clearly are disrupted right now, because of which we are unable to function at our optimal level of functioning every day. So these two models can help us understand how our needs are not entirely met in the current status, which are required for adequate level of equilibrium functioning, and then how we are as individuals affected by everything that's happening in the community. So so broadly, what should you be looking for if you say that you're experiencing psychological difficulties as part of the current situation? So we're looking at increased anxiety, uncertainty, loneliness, helplessness, frustration, irritability, disturbances in the way we eat, what we like to eat, the choice of food, sleeping pattern, when we wake up, how are we be able to pay attention, to what extent, all of that. And sometimes even substance use is an issue, because some people are dependent on substance to deal with their emotional problems, and then there are those who are dealing with addiction as well. And interestingly, the amount of information that you consume also can, result in a burnout where you're constantly just listening to things like this. Of course, if you turn on the news, there'll be new information all the time, but how much we consume is something we should look at. So burnout from that, and I've had a lot of people tell me that they're very anxious to even open social media because something or the other keeps popping up. So information or update burnout, and then there's of course exacerbation of already existing mental health related difficulties. So all of this can be caused by any of the factors that we have discussed so far. But broadly, if you look at people who are having mental health issues, these are the signs that will clearly tell you that yes, something is going on, like they're having difficulty dealing with something as part of the current situation. So these are the signs you should be looking for. And if you notice, not all of us may be experiencing those. There are people who are still able to wake up every day with a purpose, up and going, and say, okay, what can I do today differently, and so on. So yes, we can say that majority of the population is definitely experiencing a lot of the signs of burden of this pandemic, but there are people who may be exceptions as well. Now, how does that work? Like, why is that different for them is something we can understand through this model. I just wanted to stress on, the cognitive aspects of how the same situation is viewed differently by different people. So, for example, right now, if we consider the pandemic to be a stressful situation, which is the stressor, you have something known as a primary appraisal. That is, what is the situation really? Okay, what does this mean to me, right? So when you look at what does this mean to me, we can either go with looking at it as a threat versus a challenge. Now, threat is basically an indication of danger, and it means that you have to act on it, you have to avoid, it may lead to some negative consequence, and so it's something that people may fear, right? And then there's something called challenge. So challenge is an optimistic way of viewing what is in front of you. So when there is a hurdle or an obstacle in front of you and you want to overcome it and you view it as challenge, it means you're more likely to take it on as something that you can overcome. So challenging allows the person to grow in terms of developing their skills, in terms of exploring their capacities, broadening the range of their emotions, and then taking it on as a potential for growth. And threat, on the other hand, ends up making the person feel very fearful, scared, anxious, and all of that. Now, obviously, when a person is viewing something as a challenge, they're likely to approach it, versus threat, where they're likely to avoid it, right? And then comes the secondary appraisal, which is, okay, now I've understood the situation as either a challenge or as a threat. Now, what do I have in my hand or in the range of resources available around me to handle the situation? So we're looking at what are the options. One, maybe to do with financial resources, to do with home, shelter, basic necessities. Have I lost my job? Can I keep it? Am I earning enough? Are my family and friends safe? So all of these resources, do I have enough social support to get through this situation? All of these things. So to a larger extent, whatever is in your control, and if you feel that is something you can use to overcome this situation, then you will come up with different kinds of options and say, okay, so plan A, plan B, plan C, I can do all these things. Versus looking at,
yeah. Sorry to interrupt. I don't think the PPT slide has changed. It's in models of explanation, though.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Oh, yeah. Now it's changed.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, thank you.
I have one small clarification on what you said before. Just to make it, it's better to clarify certain things.
Yeah.
You see, when does one realize that they need assistance? When does one realize that they have some health issues? When does one realize that they have some mental health issues or psychological issues? because these things, the symptoms, if I may call so, like the frustration and anger, or certain things which we can relate to even a normal human being, even without this pandemic or other things, right? But now what we see around is more of these symptoms, the frustration, the anger, okay, which is more nowadays because of the closed digital environment in which we are living now.
Yeah.
Right. So if one has to assess or seek a help, okay, at what stage or when do we realize, or when do we actually get in touch with people like you to sort it out or to come out? Because the sleeping disorder, yes, many of us might be suffering from this, because what personally I can say is on the food side and on the sleeping, because there's been no time at what time we have lunch, so dinner and all those. So, and the sleeping definitely that's affected. So this is one thing because we always, as I said in my opening statement, we always find excuse to say that we are all right. I'm having a headache because of this. I'm having frustration because of that. But we don't realize that it is built up over a period of time due to various reasons, and I might require help. So when do we come to that stage? When do we recognize that stage?
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's a very, very relevant question to the previous slide I was showing. So, like you said, everything that I was mentioning earlier are all things that we generally experience: the anxiety, uncertainty, not to this extent, maybe in specific situations, helplessness, frustration, eating, sleeping, all the changes, right? So, one, we have to look at the amount of distress that it's causing. When do you differentiate between, what is so-called normal experience of negative emotions and, discomfort psychologically versus when do you need help? So one, we have to look at the amount of distress. So on a scale of say 1 to 10, if you're able to, pick yourself up and overcome it about, 5 out of the 10 times or 6 out of the 10 times, then it's okay. But there will reach a point where the person feels exhausted, right? So that was something I was getting to. So here in this model, after the person has exhausted all their resources to cope, right? The person experiences a state of burnout where nothing seems like it's working, because of which the distress is very heightened, and then they resort to means where their functionality is affected. So you need to look at these two things. One is the amount of distress that the person is experiencing. Two, how much it interferes with their functionality. So the moment the person has come up with all resources and able to cope with that situation, then they move on. It's not something that's persistent. So if a person is experiencing some difficulty only with their work, for example, then it's clear that the functionality affected is only their area of work. Otherwise they're functioning well in their family life, social life, personally, and everything. But if the difficulties are spilling over to their other areas as well, where things like they're not able to wake up from bed for some reason, not able to carry out their day-to-day activities, there is a sense of helplessness that's seeping in through almost all their areas of life, right? Then that's the time you need to seek help, because until then, honestly, self-help or self-care is the best way to go about it when it comes to long-term well-being, like quality of life and psychological well-being. But when that breaks down and when they're not able to cope with that, we have to look for high levels of distress and interfering with functionality, and how pervasive these symptoms are in terms of how it's spilling over to all their areas of life. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So we'll move on. I quickly just want to show the usual cycle of grief that we all go through, and how this is disrupted in today's world, because of which, loss or grief is something that creates a lot more anger and frustration in people. we all have this typical morning sort of a ritual where we participate in family and cultural related activities after the loss of a person. And, like we get together every 3rd day or 10th day, 13th day, and so on. So this is actually, if you look at it, it is a way of accepting what has happened. And it induces a sense of reality that yes, okay, this person is gone and now I need to deal with this. And same way how people get together during these specific days for the ritual and everything provides the person with a social support system to overcome it. But today only 5 people are allowed to go to these kind of rituals, and or even the cremation for that matter. And then you don't even know, like 1 minute they're in the ICU and then the next minute they're lost, so the whole cycle of grief itself is cut short. There is no room for any ritual sort of a thing. So this is another reason why, from a theoretical point of view, we are looking at loss and grief from a different point of view today. Moving on.
The slide hasn't changed.
Slide.
Can you see it now?
No.
We have stress appraisal now.
Yeah, now
secondary
we can.
trauma.
Yeah. So secondary trauma, not sure how many have experienced it or heard of it, is something that people who are not affected by the virus also experience. So while we're all together in the mental health difficulties aspect of the COVID situation, secondary trauma is when the person experiences a sense of trauma because of vicariously learning about other people's trauma. So you hear a lot of news about death, or watch the news. You hear another person's negative experience through the COVID situation. So that time you experience compassion fatigue, where yes, you're there for another person, you're picking up the phone, talking to them, making sure they're okay and everything. But this hits you, like it hits you because of burnout, of compassion fatigue. And the person who's unaffected by this starts feeling as if, what is this, I'm sitting at home and doing nothing, and I'm supposed to be helping people out there, and I'm safe and I'm home. And then they develop survivor guilt, basically, where they feel like they've done something wrong, but just by staying away from the situation, right? So this is a common phenomena as well that people are experiencing today. So how do we cope? So for people who have lost their loved ones, I would definitely say that yes, while we're not able to go about the traditional way of mourning the loss of the person, please do connect with others through technology. Try to organize something online and make sure that you're all gathering the social support that's available, and participate in small rituals, in the sense that if something is done at home,
ma'am, sorry to interrupt, the slide isn't changing.
Yeah, I'll make sure I go through this now.
Yeah, now we can see it.
Yeah. So participate in small rituals as long as you're comfortable with them. Please don't isolate yourself. Yes, people will come and say a lot of things, intrusive things, nosy things, or some people are extremely understanding. But try and be around in the vicinity of people. You don't have to engage with them really, but at least just stay around people. And then don't pressure yourself to feel otherwise. One of the major things that many of us are missing out on doing is normalizing the fact that we are all in this together and feeling the difficulty together. One day will not be the same as another day. So if you feel upset, it's okay to feel upset. So allow yourself that validation. And the radical acceptance is nothing but, yes, you may not like what's happening, but in order for you to do something about yourself or what's happening with you, you have to accept that this is how things are. So if you're fighting reality without even acknowledging that this is reality, and that leads to denial and frustration and anger, that no, this is not happening, then it's much harder to get over it. So the acceptance of it is extremely important. And lastly, many of the people have the why me kind of a feeling when they lose their loved ones. It's very important to keep reminding yourself that you're not alone in this, and there are so many others who are going through the same thing. So it's a universal experience for everybody. And for those who are, speaking to people who are mourning, please remember to give them space to not talk about yourself. You may have gone through this and successfully overcome, recovered, become resilient. But if they're talking about their experience, it's extremely important to validate and stay there for them. You need not give them solutions or any action oriented responses saying, why don't you try this, why don't you do this. Just stay and listen. And lastly, if you don't have proper resources while giving them information, please don't provide any information at all. Make sure it's from a valid, reliable source, because there is so much room for rumor and a lot of misinformation as well. um, and generally, when it comes to coping skills, self-care. So like I said, survivor guilt is something that a majority of the people will definitely experience. It's a very and both, like both situation, like both, where yes, people will die, at the same time some people will not also die. So some people will be infected, some people will also not be infected. So there will be a situation in which both things are happening. So, I would sincerely request everyone to take care of themselves by prioritizing themselves. So they say, in flights and all, like how you have to first put on your mask and then only help others, the oxygen mask. It's the same rule, where you have to take care of yourself in order for you to even be available for someone else in the first place. First, take care of yourself. Do whatever makes you feel good when it comes to relaxing yourself, or making time for yourself, and so on. You like to cook, please go ahead and do that. So as much as you may be tempted to feel guilty that you are sailing through this much safer and better than others, this is something, is like the need of the hour for yourself. And then comes a circle of control. This is something I also follow, and I find it really effective, where I discriminate between what is under my control and what is not in my control. So I have two circles, and I generally tend to write down my thoughts. If something worries me, I just put it down, and then I have a clearer understanding of what can I spend my time, energy, and thoughts on. So if I'm worrying about somebody not following some rule somewhere, or somebody's actions affecting me, at a point in time, there's really nothing much I can do about it. So I might as well spend my time thinking about what are the things that are in my control, and how I can develop my skills, or change the way I look at it. So look at the circle as I can control, I cannot control. And set goals. So when I say set goals, I mean small goals.
Ma'am, just one,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. You can give some example of what I can control, what I cannot control, just for people to understand.
Yeah, sure. So for example, if you're worried about somebody giving you the infection, or if you're worried about the lockdown being extended, or if you're worried about when school will open, that will definitely fall under the I cannot control. So you have two concentric circles. So inside you can control, outside you cannot control. So you can put down these things, around on the outside I cannot control. And then what I can control is what? My sleep, my eating patterns, my diet, my activities during the day, what I choose to view on TV, who I choose to talk to. So these are the things you can control, which will come right in the middle. So when you spend your energy on thinking about these things, you can spend it on it wisely, because you're spending it on something that you can control. So that way you can have a clear distinction between the two, right? Because clearly, if you're worried about the lockdown, that's something that the government works on. And if you're worried about somebody giving you the infection, that depends on where they are going, who they're meeting, and that's not in your control. So the actions of others is technically like not in your control. So yeah, that's one example. And setting goals. So small goals basically help you have some sense of hopefulness for the future. So once this is better, I would like to do this, or by the time end of lockdown, I'd like to learn so and so skills, or basically like trying to give yourself purpose in getting through the days, and at the end of the goal, when you've actually achieved it, it gives you a sense of reward, which helps you keep going, through the next few days, for however long you need to be doing this. And if you look at after the lockdown or after the situation gets better, it helps you develop a sense of hopefulness and some optimism towards the future, that there is something to look forward to. And this what if spiraling is the next one, which is something a lot of us face. So there is this thing of, what if this never happens? What if, I never go back to my job the way it was? What if things don't go back to the way that it was before? What if I contract if I go to this place? So there's a lot of what if questions, and this spiraling is something that will keep going. Like, there's basically no end to it. Once you tick off the anxiety loop in our brain, there is almost no looking back unless you exert very strong self-control over it. So one technique that you can use is called centering, basically where in order to stop the spiral of what ifs, you bring your attention back to your breath. So this basically allows you to pay attention to things, one, that is in your control, which is your breath, and two, avoids any distraction in terms of what you spend your attention on. So you might be thinking of a 500 other things, but when you bring your attention back to your breath, you'll only be focusing on the movement, the rate of your breath and things like that. So you have to like mindfully bring the attention back to your breath and spend a few minutes, a minute or two on this, and that way you're breaking the cycle of ticking off the anxiety loop in your brain. And then limit the information you consume for sure. Unfortunately, we have too much time in our hand, or rather we feel like we have too much time in our hand, because of which we're spending a lot of time on Instagram, Facebook, watching the news, doing a lot of reading online, all of that. So please wisely consume that information, because a lot of burnout can come right from just knowing these things itself. And don't let COVID dominate your conversations. Even though we're acknowledging that this is the current status of and probably the entire world, if that becomes the topic of conversation every time, you're not going to feel like you even have a life outside of this, right? So don't let that conversation dominate. And then another one that we can use in our everyday life is the restructuring, right? So this is another cognitive technique that we can use related to how we think or perceive in the current situation. So for example, I cannot see my friends or each other for a long time. Why? So it can be reframed as, my friends and I are protecting each other, which is actually the purpose of why we're all not meeting, right? So cognitive reframing, especially like in the self-isolation situation, helps you look at the other side that you may be missing out by thinking negatively. I'm stuck at home. Yes, I'm safe at home, right? I have lost all my freedom. I have relinquished my freedom for a noble purpose. I miss the things I love. I'm increasing my gratitude for the things I love. So small things like going out, meeting a friend will be more cherished and will be more, you'll be something that you'll be grateful for those things once these things are better and we recover from the situation. And the mind shift is what is really important, because we actually don't pay attention to the automatic thought that goes in our head, say a situation and then an emotion. We sort of function very reciprocally, that okay, something happens, I react, something I don't like, I'm hearing, I'm upset. So it's a very sort of reciprocal relationship there, with almost no regard for the kind of thought that goes into this kind of a situation. So please watch out for what do you tell yourself. Self-talk during this time is extremely important. If you feel that you're stuck, then exercise control over, say, just going to the terrace or taking a quick walk around your neighborhood if it's safe, and so on. So if you can, please spend time on understanding alternate ways to look at the same situation that you're dealing with right now. How else can I look at the situation? Maybe if it were this person, how would they look at it? Maybe if I were pushed to think this way, how else can I view the same situation differently? So come up with alternate ways to look at the same situation. And finally, some of the other things that we can look at to cope is maintaining a really good sleep cycle and routine. Sleep cycle is very important, not just because of the beauty sleep, but the circadian rhythm, the biological clock when it comes to eating and sleeping pattern has a lot to do with mental health conditions. So there's a lot of research that has proved that actually one of the first risk factors is having a very erratic schedule, and how that interferes with the biological clock. So you may actually be in a way preventing yourself from getting any mental health disorders just by sleeping well, right? And maintain a routine that is important because one, it helps to distinguish between each of your days, and two, it gives you a sense of predictability. So today, considering we live in a world of so much unpredictability, just creating a routine for yourself helps your mind understand that, okay, after this I'm going to do this, right? So that predictability gives a sense of security and safety in everyday life. And avoid conversations and news around bedtime. I would say this, especially to just catch up with your friends and maybe learn about what's happening today and so on. Avoid it during bedtime, because as you progress to the end of the day, your activity levels have to actually shut down, so you're not giving too much work for your brain, and not feeding it thoughts by the end of the day, just before bedtime. And work-life balance, this is one thing that a lot of them are facing difficulty, because you eat in the same place, sleep in the same place, work in the same place, everything is just in the same place. So one thing that you can consider doing is have a secluded space if possible, where you just work. So don't use that space for anything else, and don't do the work in any other place. So if it's just a corner of the room or something, just use that space and continue working there, and have clear boundaries, not just with the physical space, but if it helps, I would say just dress up like you're going to work every day, and just go sit in that corner. Whatever activities you do, don't use it for anything else. And have specific timing, like, so if you're going to start work at a certain time, make sure you finish those many hours of work just in the same place. Take breaks. So the maximum all of us can pay attention at a stretch can vary anything between 30 minutes to 45 minutes usually, if you're doing like intensive work. So you can afford to take at least a 15-20 minute break every 1 or 2 hours. And always remind yourself of the temporary nature of the situation, because the work life is sort of enmeshed with your personal life. It may feel extremely frustrating that what is this, I'm just waking up to this every day, but the situation is temporary. So please remind yourself of that as well. And lastly, I'd like to also talk about what makes a person more vulnerable in the situation when it comes to mental health condition. And please look out for these red flags. So one, if you're someone who has a tendency to think in very rigid ways, with very less cognitive flexibility or psychological flexibility, where you're thinking, yes, this has to be a certain way, it used to be like this, why is it not like that anymore? This has to be done this way. So for example, if you're at home and if somebody's helping you out with the chores or something like that, don't expect too much of perfectionism, and don't try to do things the way you used to do just because that's the way it has to be done. So rigidity in thinking, if some things are not perfect or some things are not the way it's supposed to be, it's okay. Like, if you can allow yourself to make do with it at this point. And black or white thinking is another cognitive processing error that we all tend to engage in, where we're looking at things as, yes, if I'm like this, then it means I'm good. If I can't afford to do this, then I'm a failure. Or every day you might be having expectation that, okay, today I'll finish like this, I'll do so much of work. If you can't, there is a tendency to beat yourself up, and then there is, again, it hits your self-esteem, and then you tend to feel really bad, and then it becomes very purposeless, and then there's a sense of sadness and everything that sets in. So it's a very like dichotomous way of thinking. So try and enable that gray space in the way you think about things. And then if you have a history of mental health related problems, please continue to seek help. You might be at risk, for a relapse if you don't look after yourself well at this point, especially those with depression. The lack of stimulation when it comes to social life, or even creatively or intellectually, sets the person up for risk of having another episode. So because lack of interaction with the environment can dysregulate the dopamine pathways and things like that, so it does affect the person. And adverse life experiences, like I mentioned, the death or loss of somebody, if you haven't been able to address it, please seek help professionally if you want to deal with it in a more effective manner. And also focus on developing a sense of self direction. So this is something that will help a lot of people get through very disorganized, ambiguous days. So if you focus on what's in your control and perform activities that are intrinsically motivating, that is, I do this because I feel good, versus if I do this, then maybe I can get out of the situation. If I do this, maybe somebody will praise me. If I do this, then maybe things will get better. So instead of placing the validation on outside environment, try and gain control over your activities, your everyday life. Have very few activities that are to be done, like that are structured and to be done on that day, so that it gives you a direction to keep going. Otherwise you're going to feel very chaotic, and it's just all over the place. And finally, substance use related problems. Yes, I think the last during last lockdown, there was a lot of task marks being crowded, and a lot of people abusing drugs and everything of that sort. So at this point, people can have withdrawal related symptoms if because of access, not having access to substances. And in order to cope with whatever negative emotions we may be feeling, there is a tendency to drink and sleep on it. So that is something that is to be avoided as well. Even though that's focusing on helping you feel better, there are healthier ways to go about it. So please do take help to address those issues as well. I'd like to end the presentation on a positive note. The flip side of COVID, yes, of course, is resilience. That it's amazing how the first wave happened, and then just about when we thought it was all going to get better, everybody recovered. Most people were up and back to doing whatever they do. Of course, when it comes to job related stuff and finances and everything, people are still recovering. But as as a community, I think we all were able to talk about it, reach out to each other, and then it was very amusing to see how we were all able to get over it within a short period, but not entirely. And gratitude is something that we can remind ourselves time and again, that we're very grateful for the small things in our life, and a sense of universality that definitely nobody's alone in this. And of course, the increased awareness about mental health, because I don't think the world was prepared for this, first of all. And there is a lot of under resourcing, underfunding, all that is going on with the government, and basically a lot of demand but hardly any supply. So the increased awareness, I hope in the long run, will enable people at the governmental level to pay attention to this in the long run. So yeah, so these are the brighter side, I would say, of experiencing whatever that we are today. So yeah, with that, I end my presentation. Thank you so much for paying attention. And I'm open to taking any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that wonderful presentation. We have a few questions on the YouTube, so I'll be relaying them to you now. So,
sure.
Yeah, can we first,
Neeraj,
can we just first have the presentation, the sharing stopped, so
Sure.
we can be in focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Mr. Divakar Kanchi. What is the role of faith in management of this crisis?
What is the role of?
Faith.
Faith. Right. What is the role of faith in managing
this crisis?
This crisis.
This crisis. Yes, actually, faith is everything at this point in time, because faith provides the person some hope to hold on. It acts as an anchor to keep going. So unless you believe that something is going to get better, there's no reason for it to get better. So it's very important. Faith, whether in the greater sort of power, or whether it's just praying, or just the belief in humanity and mankind as such. So faith is something that's going to take you a long way, and probably one of the best things you can have at this point in time right now.
Yeah, we see around this thing happening. Many people, now becoming more, or rather, going back to the roots and practicing their faiths and beliefs more nowadays.
Absolutely, yeah.
Adam, I have a question for you.
Yes, sure.
Now, I will talk about an exception. Okay, I see a few people after they have gone through a lot with this near-death experience, and they've seen, they've been through the hospital, they've seen, sometimes they tend to become really carefree. Now they are no more bothered about what is to come, what is to happen to them. So is something wrong with them too?
Right. So that actually has a lot to do with the person's health belief. So the health belief, a lot of health belief models are there, in which it helps us understand how the person perceives how vulnerable they are once again to such maybe the infection or any other future related risks. So if their perception of the susceptibility is lowered by such experiences, maybe because they're thinking, yeah, I've gone through this, what after this? And I'll take on anything that comes, maybe that, or something like, oh, I've gone through this, it cannot come back to me again, so I'm not going to get it, so let me just go about doing this. There, the perception of risk for self is low, and similarly for other is also low, which is actually faulty thinking, because you may get it again and infect another person as well. Right. So the health belief is something that that might explain why people do that, from the question that you're asking.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, ma'am, I do have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Naseem. Misconception about the vaccination, ma'am.
Right.
Make understand people that vaccination is the only solution. A lot of misconception, and a lot of people are not coming out to get it vaccinated. Even your near family, if you talk about that, they feel that no, it's time is there. Let it be very clear. Government is not clear. This what you said. This percentage of cureness is not correct. How to deal with that kind of people?
One is definitely talking to an expert about it. So if we can, make accessible to such people the awareness through credible sources. So one of the ways in which people feel persuaded or convinced is by listening to people who have credibility in that area, right? So accessing one credible resources like doctors and people actually coming out more and talking about this vaccine. Let's say even the manufacturers, or even like people who are involved in that healthcare field. One is that. The other thing is trust. I think it also has a lot to do with how much a person innately, immaterial of whether it's vaccine or no vaccine or whatever, is able to trust that this will work. So if you notice, a lot of people generally have a tendency to be, mistrusting, like, of other people. And there is also this, people come up with all these rumors that if you have some condition, then it's not going to work for you. And then there are also other people who spread rumors that say, oh, this person died because of this, and so on. So the person must be persuaded to access right kind of resource for information versus just something hearsay, right? And if somebody is talking to you like that, please, if you can access some information, please send it to them, and tell them that this is from this kind of a person, so please go through it and then talk about it. Not to pay attention to any vicarious learning. Just because it happened to somebody else doesn't mean it will happen to me. if you notice even the responses of how people are, after a vaccine, somebody is having severe side effects, somebody is hardly having anything. So the idea is to go about it by taking it like one step at a time and allowing each person to go through the process versus this one herd mentality, where it happened to somebody, so it's going to happen to me. So I guess access to information, the tendency to trust, and making sure that they are not learning from other people and instead going through it for themselves. I think these may be things that will help spread awareness about the vaccine.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because the actor, the comedian who passed away,
Yeah.
Vivek. So people were
Yeah.
relating to vaccine, and suddenly
Correct.
the acceptancy became less
Correct.
because people started
Correct.
relating to it. So
Yeah.
right.
Okay. There is one more question.
Yes.
When your close one dies and you do not even get to see their body or conduct a funeral, how do you even process the fact that they are not going to be with you anymore?
True. That's an extremely difficult situation, and I don't think anybody can even imagine that for themselves. It's really hard, and it's a very individual experience. One, I would say, first, take your time. Take your time to be in denial. Take your time to experience the shock, the anger, all of it. um, because it's not like, there's this sense of it's not fair, and why me, and why is it happening to me, or maybe I should have been more careful, or maybe I should have gotten help earlier, or maybe this should have happened. So there's a lot of counterfactual thinking as well. So one thing, please take your time. Two, you can reach out to people, just talking about it little by little. I understand it might be really pressurizing for people to, they are expected to narrate their experience to everyone. That is not necessary. So allow yourself to be the one that decides how much you want to, access people, and make sure you're talking to the right people, because whoever you talk to is going to influence how you feel about whatever has happened to you. So choose the people that you're going to reach out to with regard to this, and talk about it as and when you feel comfortable, and how much ever you feel comfortable. And finally, if it helps, you could go back to looking at pictures, or reliving positive memories, because as much as it's difficult, that is what is going to help you process what has happened in a less destructive manner, that you remind yourself that this is true, it has happened. So instead of venting out in other unhealthy ways, if you process it through positive emotions and memories, it's going to help you channel that energy in the right sense. So I would say these things. Yeah.
I would like to ask a question.
Yes.
So you said your name also. Yeah.
I was about to tell. I'm Rashmi. So
Yes.
I just wanted to know that taking extra care, like just being thinking about COVID all the time and doing the things which can prevent you from, like when you are going out and masking and sanitizing and then coming home, taking steam, keeping and making all the family members also doing the same thing. Is it related to some mental illness, or it's just like being extra precautious?
Yes, it definitely falls under the extra precaution, but it depends on what is the intentionality behind that. For example, if you're not stepping out anywhere and you're practically not accessing anybody, then it may fall under an obsessive, over cautious behavior, where the focus is largely on making sure that you're avoiding something without even having any exposure. So it causes a lot of distress for people, because they might be like, what's wrong with you? Why are you making me do this every day? We're just sitting inside the house. If not, if the person is somebody who's going up and about outside in the environment and requires people to be safe because they are exposed, and in turn they're exposing their family, then it's okay. It's okay to follow a routine. And also, in case on some days, for some reason, you're not able to follow it, then like the person should watch out for a compulsion, like, an anxiety might set in saying that, oh no, today I didn't do it, because of this is something going to happen tomorrow. For example, by chance, if something happened, if there's an immediate tendency to attribute the lack of following routine to the fact that something happened, then it's something, that's a little different, like something you should address as a mental health concern.
Also, how to deal with that fear that if I have not followed the precautions, if only for a few minutes or for a day, then that fear that I may get it, or I may give it to others. How to deal with that?
I would say you could look at evidence-based. For example, you can put it down as evidence for and against my thought. So if your fear is, I'm going to give it to others because I have not followed this routine for today, realistically appraise the situation by putting in evidence for and against. So for evidence would be, I went out to the grocery store today and somebody sneezed in front of me, or somebody was not well, or I touched this person today, or I got in contact with somebody like this. So what did it actually happen? Not emotional reasoning where the evidence is, I feel like this might happen. There is no feeling that can come as evidence. And then evidence against would be, I did not go out anywhere. It's one day, and does it really make significant difference in terms of, say, I've followed this for 30 days, 40 days, that one day does it really make a difference? And followed by maybe if I've not touched anybody, I have not nobody from my house has gone out anywhere, nobody is showing the symptoms. So these may be evidences against. So you could weigh which one is something that looks more reasonable, and set that as a reminder time and again whenever you feel the anxiety. Because the problem here is, logically you may know that this does not make sense, but emotionally it may be difficult to accept because fear always takes over logic. So if you can maybe put it on somewhere, that some place that you see all the time, or maybe put it on your phone, or some place that you can access time and again, the evidence against, then you can remind yourself that no, it's fine, I'm just overthinking. So that self-talk is really important at that point.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Shamaji.
Thank you. It was a wonderful session. I had a question when I think it's a personal thing where we are very careful about, not getting affected. We have a small son who suffered pneumonia just before the onset of COVID. And thereby he was, hospitalized for 10-15 days. And also we have this extra careful fear, definitely. So we deal with that thing so much. And as much as we understand that there should be compassion for other people who are not doing their bit in terms of taking care of themselves, suppose we have a neighbor or we meet somebody who's not wearing masks, or doing everything that is against what is supposed to be done. So as much as I understand that there should be compassion and understanding of why one might do that, there is a lot of anger that sets in, where you feel, why can't you just understand, where it's such a simple thing, why can't you do that to save yourself first, and then of course because of you other people will also be safe. So that kind of things rationally we may understand, but it's not happening when you understand. So I don't know how to deal with that. If you could give us a way.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. A lot of times when the like the domestic help or drivers and things like that, they are not wearing masks. People get very furious and everything. So and yes, you're right in thinking that it might be that you may say, yeah, it's okay, I can't really help this person. One thing is, for us, what we follow has a lot to do with whether we get affected or not. So let's say the person is not wearing a mask or not engaging in the safety behaviors as well. If you do, then pretty much more than 60 to 70% of things in your control. Like you double mask, you wear gloves, you carry sanitizer, and so on. So I would say, one, if you can avoid getting in touch with them itself, if you feel that is something that is preoccupying you too much during the day, or if it's just a few instances where they pop in to give you something, or you have to go and drop off something or something like that, then I would say you follow what you have to follow, and maybe to additionally just leave the stuff outside their door and come off and things like that. So you can be doubly cautious, but not to an extent where of course you pick up a fight or anything with all of them. But I would say be doubly cautious, and two, if you can avoid, please go ahead and avoid, because nothing at this point in time is worth distressing yourself so much that you have to put up with it and be okay with it. You get what I'm saying? So like doubly cautious and avoidance is something that you can definitely use. And it's the same thing that I said earlier. If you can push yourself or persuade yourself to think about what's in your control and what's not in your control, definitely you can invest your energy and time in thinking about only those things, versus spending your time on other people related behaviors.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, ma'am. Myself, SANDHYA. I have a question, ma'am.
Yeah, can you raise your voice, please?
Yeah, hi, ma'am. Myself, SANDHYA.
Yeah.
Hi. Yes.
I want to ask a question: how to deal with kids? How to self-motivate them during this pandemic situation, who are at home for like a long it's been
time,
like months. Yeah, it's been like months together. They are staying at home. How to keep them self-motivated? We keep on engaging with some of the other things, but still they get irritated, frustrated with all the things. What we make them do regularly.
How old are they?
One is 15 years and one is 10 years.
Sorry, one is
15 and 10.
15 and 10.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I think with a 15-year-old, maybe it's slightly easier to explain the nature of the current situation. I would say actually to both of them, be honest in telling them what's actually going on. Don't just say, oh yeah, it's a pandemic, we are all supposed to do this, so please do this. Not like that, but actually try and make them understand the seriousness of the situation, and even tell them the difficulties that others might be going through, which is the same as other kids who are going through the same thing. And two, as you mentioned, you might be occupying them doing a lot of things, but please don't try and give a lot of gadgets, because gadgets, especially in children and teenagers, where the brain is still developing. Our brain develops till about the age of 25 to 26. So 15 is really not much. Like, they still have a long way to go. So repeated use of gadgets for long hours can actually change the wiring in their brain and make them more irritable. So it's a very vicious cycle. So they may develop attention difficulties, and they may develop difficulty concentrating, and any other activity will not look interesting once you give the gadget. So that is one thing I would say you avoid. And again, the third one is actually create a structured routine. When I say a routine, obviously it's harder to do this with older kids, but small things that they may like, leisure activities, doing things together. If they feel resistant towards some activity, you can participate in it, and slowly, gradually wean it off and engage them independently in that activity. Creating a routine is important because, like I said, it creates a sense of stability, and that can avoid irritability or any frustration. And because their physical activity is extremely important, especially at this age, they have a lot of energy, they don't know how to spend it. I would say, put on some things online, and reward them, appreciate them, and engage them as a part of an activity that everybody enjoys. Any physical activity is something that you should definitely focus on. Or if they like something that's more creative, then give them books like, these Zentangles and, the coloring ones where they can focus a lot of attention on something, and that takes long time. And what works best is always engaging them in household chores, because it allows a lot of physical exertion, and it gets work done, and they feel like especially cooking and things, they feel like they've achieved something, by the end of it, and everybody's praising the dishes and so on. So these are some ways you can try, if you already have it.
You already tried all these now.
All this. Okay, what is the difficulty that you might be facing?
Like my younger one always, she wanted to go and play with her friends at this time. Since we keep on telling that you can't do at this time. We need still.
Do you also give reasons?
Yeah, same thing. Pandemic.
So try and elaborate on the reason. Maybe make them watch an information video or something. Maybe okay, they can talk to people online, and at this age, they understand it better if their peers also tell them that this is the difficulty we are facing, instead of older people telling them, no, this is how it has to be done. So try and engage them in that conversation with peers and so on. So I think information at this point is something. And one other thing is, if they are acting out, you have to please be patient, because there's this thing called co-regulation where the child is acting out or the child is having a difficult time. The parents or the mother father has to keep calm. Otherwise, it's going to become a really difficult situation where you're yelling, they're yelling, they feel misunderstood, and so on. But as a parent, I would say, please just remind yourself that this is temporary. It's going to get over soon.
Adam, I have a question again.
Yes. We'll make this last one because it's running late.
Okay, I just have one more. There's a lot of bitterness among the families who are affected and who have recovered. They've completely lost faith. They have lost faith in the community as such. How can we help them? We keep just telling them it's like that. That is how everyone has faced. That is how people react to this situation. But there's a lot of bitterness in them, even after they have recovered and they are fine now, but they've completely lost faith. How do we help?
In what sense do you mean? Like completely lost?
They have a feeling that they cannot trust people anymore, because when they went through the COVID, when they were sick, so the way people started treating them and they were running away from them, and so how do we help them really? We keep telling them this is how even you would react. That is how we keep telling them, but that is not the right way to approach these people. So can you put some light on this?
So that is something that can definitely be considered as an adverse life experience, because one, there is such a dearth of beds and services that people are literally like in the hospital hallway and getting this oxygen mask and everything, just lying there for the heck of it, and it's really difficult, and because it's overcrowded and people are overburdened. And like I said, even my neighbor, they ripped off the notice and everything from the government. So the stigmatization is something we are seeing, very similar to the old times where, HIV came up and everybody's like, oh, you touch them, you'll get it, and so on. And there is still, even for people who are educated, there's a lot of misperception in terms of how you contract COVID. So whether it's in the air, or people say it's in the water, and people say that's like, no, you have to touch. There's so much still, confusion on what this virus really is. So one, when it comes to the lack of faith or like very distasteful experiences, they will eventually learn that all this was because of the ambiguity that's present in the current situation. So there is a lot of things that are still unknown about the virus, because of which it's very easy to stigmatize. So when you don't know something, you think what you know is what it is, right? So, and people are hardly open to any kind of alternate information. So if they believe that this is how they're going to contract it, they stick to it, and they cannot believe that no, maybe what I'm thinking is wrong. So it's very unfortunate that these people behave this way, but I don't think it would entirely help to say that this is how the community is or this is how everyone will react. I would actually suggest you to tell them that it's really sad that they're feeling that this way, and validate how they're feeling, versus telling them that there's no point in feeling how they're feeling, because it's their personal individual experience. And if someone continues to tell them that it's not supposed to be like this, everybody is experiencing the same thing, everybody feels the same way, there is a sense of dismissal that people feel usually, and that makes them feel like us against the world kind of a feeling, like I am infected, I was at some point and you are not, so don't look at me like that, that kind of a team formation kind of a thing in their head, the stigma and prejudice and everything. So please validate if that's how they feel, and tell them that the reason may be because of the ambiguity and the unknown nature of the virus, but it will come around when there is more awareness and that people are more informed about the situation. So I'm confident that will help them feel better.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming forward and asking questions.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. You are.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nirja.
I can't hear.
Can you hear me now? You're not able to hear?
Yeah, we hear you, Nirja.
Okay. So I'll go on. I think she's having some trouble with it.
Mic is on.
Yeah.
Can you hear, ma'am? Maybe the speaker is off.
Yeah.
Hello?
Can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can go ahead, Nirja.
Okay. First of all, thank you to Mr. Prakash for organizing this entire talk. I think it was the need of the hour. Everybody needed to, recognize the importance of mental health and learn ways to cope with it. And I would really like to thank SANDHYA SHIVAKUMAR for gracefully accepting our invitation and enlightening us all on how we can really take care of our mental health. And I thank all the people who have joined the Zoom meeting and for being so participative, for asking questions, and for interacting so much. Thank you, everybody. And I would also like to thank those who have joined us on YouTube and for asking us questions there also. Your participation really meant a lot. It really made this session interactive. So thank you so much. Can you hear us now?
Yeah. Thank you, Neeraja. It was a wonderful session. I think, unfortunately, at the end, we have some technical issues with Madam Sandhya in her laptop, but I'm sure she can listen once the recording is out. So thank you, everybody, for your time. So I will end the session now. Thank you.